Hey, John, good afternoon.
Hey, how are you?
I am great. I am really excited that we're back to Leadership Alive and have a chance to just talk about something and debate it and share what we're learning, share what we know, share what we don't know, because I know we've never had pockets full of silver bullets to fix all of these problems. But I'm really excited for today's call. How about you?
Me too. And the learning never stops. That's what just keeps blowing my mind is that the
Uh,
more you and I plunge into leadership and plunge into helping emergency service organizations, we just keep saying, wow, there is so much we don't know. And the joy, of course, comes from continuing to explore and learn. And that's what I'm excited about today. I'm just hoping we can kind of explore this topic and share what we're curious about and so on.
Yeah. And I mean, you really hit it on the head when you mentioned kind of how continuing to learn about leadership teaches us more of what we don't know. It seems like the more we learn helps us understand the less that we really know. And what I've really been learning with this concept of the great resignation is really how little I know about it. And certainly just watching and reading has really intrigued me to several different things. I had a chance, John, to read two recent articles. One was from the Harvard Business Review, and the other was from the Pew Foundation in September and October of this particular year. And both of them talked about this concept of the Great Resignation. And I was really intrigued at some of the things that it talked about. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd just like to share with you what really came out of two independent bodies said very similar things. So if you wouldn't mind, I thought maybe I'd share those, and then you and I might talk a little bit about them. Is that okay?
Hey, that's great. And this, we're connecting this to the difficulties leaders are having right now around workforce. And
Yeah.
so that, I mean, you and I are hearing more than ever than at any time in our consulting career, this issue. So that's what we're aiming to talk about today. How do you lead during these times? What can you do? What's this all about?
Yeah, and to just build on that just for a moment, because it does seem to be two different stories that I hear from clients who call. I recently had a chance to present at the American Ambulance Association annual conference around workforce engagement and the Great Resignation. And it was so interesting, the stark difference between organizations who said fully staffed, actually have a waiting list, to others who said, of course, the reverse, which is we're struggling to get even the bare minimum on the road. And that chasm, there was nobody in between. There was no one who said, good days, bad days. It was either or. And so thank you so much for making that overt connection to what we're learning and what we're trying to pass on to the folks that we're honored and privileged to work with around the Great Resignation, and more specifically around the role that culture and engagement and I suggest three simple but incredibly profound conversations can make on employee engagement. And that's the connecting, encouraging, and expectation conversation. But I wanted to try to see, based on the research from these two articles, if that's even true. Because there's something in the articles that when I read it, I thought, something we've been saying for many years is wrong. And I want to come back to it.
Okay.
So here's what people smarter certainly than I am found as they interviewed people during this Great Resignation. So 5 reasons why employees cited leaving. And the number one reason was burnout. A company or an organization that was going through changes, and then 3 things that had a tie: lack of flexibility, instances of discrimination, contributions and ideas not being valued. And then next, insufficient benefits and their well-being not being supported by the company. What were job seekers seeking? Why were they going somewhere else? Better compensation, better management, a better company reputation, a better work-life balance, and a more flexible work schedule. And then lastly, to just stir the pot as we began, they also asked them, what do you want? What would you have wanted to stay? You're going to love the first one. They said, we just wanted somebody to listen. We wanted actions and words to align. They talked a ton about what, John, you and I describe as the role of the supervisor, or the person leading in the middle. They wanted open and honest conversations. They felt that bosses were often distrustful. They didn't get meaningful feedback. They felt like just cogs in the wheel. Leaders didn't quickly deal with poor performers, and that well-being wasn't normalized. So I just was blown away by that for two reasons I wanted to pull out, and I bet you there's a bunch you wanted to pull out as well. But I wanted to start with the first one, which is when I read it, the first thing that caught my attention was compensation. And I thought to myself, John and Aaron have been preaching for the longest time that it's not compensation why people join organizations or stay, or why they don't join them or leave them. We've cited numerous research articles that says it's the boss, it's leadership, it's their actions, their inactions, what they do, what they don't do. So I'm curious, Mr. Becknell, why then, if what we've said for the longest time is right, then why did people during the Great Resignation say that it's compensation would have made them stay? What do you think? Of course, I know the answer because I read the article. I'm curious. What do you think they meant?
Well, I want to hang on to compensation for just a second, because I want to lead up to it. And I want to see if you agree with me. I'm hearing from people about issues that, so workforce has been a dominant issue, finding enough of the right people, keeping enough of the right people for the last decade, right? For 10 years of our work, for many organizations, being fully staffed with happy, fulfilled, engaged employees has been a challenge. But there is something new afoot. And so what we're looking at broadly is the last 18 to 20 months that we're seeing this big change, which seems to coincide with COVID, in which people are saying, I don't know if I want to stay, or I don't know if I want to work 3 jobs. I don't know if I want to do it. So here's what I'm seeing. What I'm seeing is this job impacting EMS organizations, both public, private, EMS only organizations, at rates that are even stronger than they were pre-COVID. The second thing I'm seeing is organizations in the emergency service market that were impervious to this before are extremely surprised at the fact that they don't have waiting lists that they don't have. So I'm talking about high paid, low volume fire departments. I'm talking about law enforcement agencies who always had a waiting list of people who wanted to be it, are not only no longer have waiting lists, but are struggling. I just happened to text one of our friends in a fire department on Thanksgiving Day, and he responded and said that he told me about what they were doing at the fire department. He was on duty. He's a battalion chief, and but at the end of his thing, he said, "I'm on the 10th of 11 straight days." Now these are 11 24-hour shifts. of not being able to go home. And this is unheard of in his department.
Mm,
This was a department that always had people beating down the door,
mm,
trying to qualify for the lowest position just
mm,
because they wanted to be in there. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the research is now showing that this is not just in emergency services, but also in allied health.
mm.
It is estimated that in the last 18 months, 20%, 1/5 of all healthcare workers in the United States have left.
Mm.
And we are seeing this from nursing assistants to nurses to respiratory therapists to all the way up to physicians. And so this is a huge issue confronting our workers. So I wanted to lay that groundwork. Are you hearing similar?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're certainly seeing it on an operational level as our hospitals that we may transport patients to often talk about not having beds. And what they're really saying is we have the physical space, but we don't have the staff necessary to have patients in those physical spaces. And so we're experiencing it. Our partners, as you mentioned, are experiencing it. And I think we easily know it outside of our public safety, healthcare, EMS, when we look at Southwest Airlines canceling hundreds, thousands of flights for lack of staff. Um, I got to experience it coming back from Nebraska. Had a wonderful leadership academy out in Grand Island. Got to Lincoln to take my flight back to Minneapolis and didn't have a flight crew. So I jumped in the car and drove 6 hours home. And so I think we're seeing it all over. We're seeing it at Caribou and Starbucks and the hotel and the grocery store, and we're seeing it in the shipping companies, and the list goes on.
So to connect it to your question about compensation. So one of the things it seems that we're seeing is that we are seeing that the worker is beginning to value themselves in a way that they haven't before. They are seeing a value for themselves in a way that they haven't before. How does that stack up with what you're reading?
Yeah, spot on. So as you read on the surface, you see them say compensation benefits. And like anything, devil's in the detail. So when you read into the material, to the finding, to the questions, to the comments, what the employees were saying is, if you want me to work in a place that has poor work conditions, bad culture, poor leadership, and all of the more things you could imagine, then you're going to have to pay me more. And so it didn't appear that anything around the concepts of compensation that they get rated usually number 3 or number 6 on a top 10 list have changed. What really has become transparent is the voice of the worker, the voice of the employee, who says, either A, I'm going to leave and I'm going to go find an organization that has a culture that I can be highly engaged in, or if you want me to stay here and it is going to be a bad culture and bad work conditions and bad leadership, then you're going to have to pay me a lot more to do it. And what really caught my attention is, John, you have categorized what employees want from work in 3 words. And often you add a 4th as well. But your work and our organization's work over so many years comes back to say what employees want is to be respected, do work that has meaning, that creates a connection for them. And then often the 4th you add in is to say an organization or a cause that's worthy of their loyalty, worthy of their attention. And it was just so profound to read what felt like the Great Resignation is about that. That if COVID has taught individuals anything, is to say life is short, and it's too short to work in an environment that doesn't make me feel respected, doesn't have meaning, doesn't connect, and isn't worthy of my time, my loyalty, my attention. And so it just provided another piece of evidence that, unfortunately, my words, that I don't know that all of us in emergency medical services or in public safety believe in. That our competitive edge now and into the future is not going to be about response times, the shiniest of trucks, the newest procedure or guideline, but it's going to be about creating an environment, a culture that people can be engaged, that they can feel enthusiastic, loyal, committed. And those things show up in a way that they're willing to do more than what's expected. And for me, both as a partner with you in this company called SafeTech, but also as an operator of an ambulance service, it was literally grab by the ears and shake my head to say, sit up and focus on culture and engagement. And as I'm building my budget for this next year, to ask myself, am I building culture and engagement into my budget, or am I just buying trinkets and gadgets?
So when you talked about this, you mentioned the word burnout, but I'm going to connect that to compensation here in a minute. But what I'm hearing a lot of is whenever we encounter difficulty, it's one of our brain's shortcuts is it likes to have an easy explanation. If I'm suffering in some way, I want an easy explanation.
One of our cognitive biases.
Right. So I am hearing a shortcut. So what the explanation we're hearing is we're having this problem because we had COVID. A lot of people got to go home from work. The government gave a bunch of handouts, and now no one wants to work. What's the research telling us? That's kind of a shortcut explanation to say, yeah, people just got lazy and they're expecting a handout. How does that stack up with the research?
Yeah, research would say something different. And again, it goes back to what we were just talking about with compensation, is people are saying burnout is manifested when I work in a place that I don't feel connected, I don't feel respected, and doesn't bring me meaning. And when I work in a place that I feel respected, I feel connection and brings me meaning, then I don't feel burned out. And so we often talk, especially in our leadership and supervisor academies, about a program that Charlotte, that Medic did many, many years ago. And I'm honored to say that I met the gentleman along with Joe Penner that really created this system. He now works at an ambulance service in Greenville, South Carolina. So they 1 to 10 scale, 10 being really hard work, 1 being really easy work. They rated things, and shortcut, because we have limited time with each other, they rated calls that we might call traumatic, difficult, critical, complex as really easy work. Sitting on coverage, walling or boarding a patient, really hard work. So that work says it isn't about the cognitive or physical aspects of the job. It's about if that work made me feel respected, connection, and meaning. And so when we go on that traumatic call, regardless of the pieces that might feel emotional, the passing of someone, a traumatic injury, an injury that can appear and look and feel and smell grotesque, we felt like we got to use our skills. These things that we learned, we put in place. And if this patient was going to have a positive outcome, it was enhanced by me being able to be there. But when I don't do that, when I sit in coverage all the time, when I have to go do other people's calls, when leadership is bad and I feel disrespected and I don't get information and I feel misled, when I feel like I'm just a cog in the wheel, you just beat the mule kind of thing, then I feel burnout because it doesn't bring me connection, meaning, and respect.
Yeah,
It just is so intriguing.
And I think one thing our listeners can a little tool for our listeners is to not necessarily Google burnout and look for an explanation,
And not a clinical one.
right?
We want to make it pathological.
Yeah, and burnout is very subjective, but typically what we're talking about today and what employees will refer to as burnout is a combination of two things. One is I'm not feeling much satisfaction at work. And along with that, I'm feeling a certain degree of fatigue, exhaustion. And that kind of fatigue and exhaustion is not something 8 hours of sleep fixes.
John, you often use, I think, a word that fits so well here, a combination of words. You call it meaning fatigue. And I think that is such a excellent categorization. You can almost touch those two words, meaning fatigue. And what do you mean by that when you say that?
Yeah, so meaning is always about context. And it when something is meaningful, it connects to something bigger, larger, greater than ourselves, and it provides context. So I can do something really difficult. I can go without food. I can go without sleep for a long period of time, as long as it feels meaningful. I'm willing, we know from countless stories of veterans who've served our nation and first responders who've served our nation, people will sacrifice everything when they can connect it to something that they perceive. Remember, they perceive, not you as the leader perceive it. They perceive it as meaningful. And so often when that's absent is when people begin to feel burnt out, and especially 24/7 operations. If I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I don't feel the context of what I'm doing connects with something that I value and is valued by others, I very easily can find myself saying, this isn't worth it. And if there's one set of words that we're hearing from workers today, both those that are still working and those that are leaving and resigning, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
And we may say, well, wait a minute, you're getting X amount of dollars. When I was a young EMT, I got $2.30 an hour. You're getting, and we go on that way. But remember, these things are perceptions of the employee themselves.
Yeah, there's a interesting challenge in front of employers across our nation, whether they're inside EMS or outside EMS. That's what to do about the cost of living for 2022. Social Security Administration cites the cost of living, the CPI for Social Security for 2022 is going to be 5.9%. Medicare is providing a CPI to ambulance services of 5.1%. So the question is, do we do the standard 2% that most organizations have done? Or we already maybe have a contract that spells out what it is? Little data, just because I've done the data. Food prices have gone up 5.7%. Energy prices have gone up 6.3%. Around here in the Midwest, this time last year, a gallon of gas would cost you $1.87. Today, it's pushing $3.08.
Wow.
So it's a mathematical conversation, but it's more than that. Think of whether or not you do the cost of living, the 5.1, the 5.9, whatever the number might be, in a new context that says, doing it or not doing it, does it correct? Does it connect to respect, meaning, and the other aspects. So thinking about it as well in the burnout context, doing it or not doing it, does someone then say, the work isn't worth it? One thing that I heard recently at a client site is someone said the words of, they're not worth it. I thought, well, what is that? And I asked the person, and I thought maybe they were talking about patients and nursing home calls or long distance transfers or non-emergency work. And he said, no, I mean the organization and specifically the leaders. They're not worth it.
So I think you're getting us to the point where we should talk a little bit about some practical applications. So if people are in this spot, and many of us are, and we're planning for 2022, and we're beginning to think about the year ahead, how could we begin to approach both our organization and leadership in such a way that we account for the Great Resignation, we account for ongoing workforce challenges, and we account for the possibility that we will likely still have difficulties such as COVID, such as political disputes, all of the things that are making work so difficult today, vaccine mandates, mask mandates, whatever those might be. We don't know what 2022 is going to bring, but likely it will be more difficulty. So what can we begin to tell our listeners?
So I might suggest three broad things. The first might be that you invest in leaders and leadership, especially in the middle. And I would like, and John and I can expound upon that. The second would be that you make culture and engagement as important as you do everything else in the organization. Many will tell us they can't afford culture and engagement at the same time as they tell us about the multi-million-dollar purchase of ambulance, the multi-million-dollar purchase of a CAD system. And for the longest time, we would say, all of that stuff sounds great, but what do you do if you don't have any people? And they scoffed. And I'm not trying to be callous. I'm just trying to be a little stir the pot in a way to get us to think. And the third would be that we begin to use the language of the three conversations. And if we add in storytelling as one of the ways that the three conversations work. So that's what I would suggest. Invest in leadership, especially in the middle. Make culture and engagement as important as you make the other aspects. And I'll know it's important when you spend the same amount of money on it as you spend on the other things. And the third is to use those simple but incredibly powerful conversations to begin to build, strengthen, and deepen engagement in your organization.
So let's talk about those three for a minute.
Yeah.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about leadership and investing in leadership. And we have a few clients who are getting this. What we mean by that is they recognize that leadership is not a training program that you send people to and then it's done. That leadership is not a title that you have. Leadership is not simply a team that gets together and says, we're the leaders and now we need to solve these problems. That leadership is really a deep investment in oneself and in others with the aim of influence. How can I influence people in a positive way? And what you and I encounter in many emergency services organizations is leaders who are not respected by their subordinates, leaders who do not have a brand with their people that's warm and positive, leaders who have gotten by some way to the role that they're in, but not because of the vast followership they have behind them. So one of the things I would suggest is that, and I'm suggesting this to all my clients, is that you as a leader, ask yourself, what's over my shoulder? Do I have a ready core of people who are enthusiastically following me? And are they following me because I'm a transformational leader? In other words, because I have a vision that people are excited about, that I have built a relationship with my followers, and that I have character. There's a match between my words and actions and who I am as a human being that makes people want to follow me. And if not, get to work on it. You don't have to be revolutionize yourself overnight. But one of the first things you could do is just do some inquiry. Ask the people that you want to influence how you're doing with a great sense of humility and openness to hearing what we're finding is mature leaders show up as being open and in pursuit of critique. They're always looking and saying, how am I doing? What could I be doing better? And so the first thing is, I would say, in your own practice of leadership, start asking yourselves, how could I be a leader that people really want to follow? That's the first thing. And then I would say, and I know you're going to have something to say about this, is start investing in the other leaders in your organization and the leadership team. We well, I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to overemphasize the need to do our own work. So just broadly, bluntly, the difference between mediocre leaders that we meet, great leaders that we meet, and bad leaders that we meet is who does their own work. So do your own self-assessment. What's the last book that you read? What's the last course that you took? What's the last podcast that you listened to? What work are you doing for yourself and on yourself? That's where the real work is doing our own work, being vulnerable. So couple wonderful little, they're called shorts. Brene Brown creates them, and one is about blame. And when I watched it, it was like watching a mirror, because as leaders, one of the things, especially when we're not making the investments that we need to make, is when something goes bad, we just go to blame. Because blame doesn't require us to look the other way and say, I wonder what about this I own. So great leaders do their own work. Doesn't mean that they're not fallible, doesn't mean that there's not weaknesses in the armor, but they actually embrace those things and not hide away from them.
Yeah, and one thing, Aaron, I've been talking to people about is just pick one thing, one area that maybe it's your tendency toward anger, maybe it's your unwillingness to really listen, maybe it's your difficulty in really taking time to spend with the people that you're leading. But pick something and look inside, because we often talk about this as our roots. Who we are comes to leadership with us. Whatever lack of confidences we have, whatever obsessions, compulsions, whatever wounds we have, we bring all of that to our leading. And when things are tough, that stuff gets magnified and really shows up.
Yeah, I mean, the analogy is, imagine you're standing in front of a group of 1,000 people about to give a presentation. It would be hard not to imagine you're thinking, is my shirt buttoned? Do I have anything stuck in my teeth? Is my zipper up? I mean, just all of that stuff we would think through. That's really what we're talking about in the conceptual way with leadership, is that light, like standing on the stage in front of 1,500 people, is shining on us. Yeah. And, John, you mentioned investing in the leadership and the leadership team. One of the things that always confuses me is we don't question that our paramedics, our EMTs, our billers, our mechanics, all kinds of different aspects of our EMS organizations, that they need to regularly refresh the job. And of course, we easily think of that with paramedics and EMTs and EMRs and firefighters and such. And we think of the classes and the courses that they take all the time. And of course, our billers take coding classes on a regular basis and webinars and seminars, and our mechanics and our dispatchers. But why is it that if we do anything for leadership, which often we don't, the thought of regularly refreshing our leadership is just foreign? Don't have the money for it. Don't have the time for it. Yeah, and we'd never put an EMT out on the road if they didn't have their EMT card, even if the state didn't require us. We would never not have them learn the newest, greatest about ACLS and PALS and PHTLS and every other 4-letter acronym that's out there. I just wonder why we don't make leadership that same way and refresh our leadership on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's the way to think about it is like a battery, right? Your leadership battery runs down, and you've got to charge it back up, and especially during these difficult times, because all of these employees who are asking the question, should I stay or not stay? One of the things that they're looking at is there any juice flowing from above? Are the people I'm working for charged up, or are they scared? Are they worn out? And we just got together with one of our clients, 45 leaders with one of our people groups, and just spent some time with supervisors, managers, directors, leaders. And it was just wonderful to see how even in a day, the battery charge started to go back up. And these have been difficult times, and it would be surprising if your battery isn't a little bit run down. But what we mean by charging up the battery is get some time off site, do some things together as a group that is not about solving problems in the organization, but about really charging your leadership battery. What might that be? And we often find it's that getting off site, it's spending some time talking about what you're struggling with, maybe picking a podcast to discuss, maybe picking a particular topic to go deep on. Those are the kinds of things where the batteries start to get charged back up.
And often, John, people tell us, boy, I could never get my whole leadership team together and get them off site. And here's what I want to say. That's the first question you better answer. Why is it that an organization is structured in such a way that we can't pull everybody together? Yes, somebody's going to have maybe a phone by their ear or the radio on, or maybe cat up on a screen to just be that resource. But there's no replacement for it. Breaking the team up to get together just creates well, what did that team talk about? What did this team talk about? Doing it on site just creates an environment where it doesn't feel different. People can come grab you on the breaks. You're going to walk back to your office and log back into the email. So there's never a refreshment that comes.
Well, let's go to that second one. So as our time's flying, that second one we talked about was, you said, invest in culture and engagement during this time. And of course, we often see culture as how you are together, how you treat each other. What kind of stories do you tell? What kind of songs do you sing? What kind of rituals do you have? How do you treat each other? All of that stuff that comes together to be how we are as a group. And engagement for us, of course, is this warm and positive relationship between the employee and the organization, which is characterized by employees who are committed, enthused, loyal, and willing to do more than required. So talk a little bit about investing in that.
Yeah, the first thing that I encourage you to do to invest in your culture is clean house.
Oh.
If you want to invite over company, or you want to keep the company that you have, that you really want, our star employees, got to clean house. There is nothing better to get rid of a great engaged employee than by not dealing with a bad engaged employee. So it's not our not so stars that leave on their own. It's our stars, especially during the Great Resignation. They know they're in demand. They know they can demand a premium price, and they can get it.
And here's a little tool that you can do if you're thinking about cleaning house, is get your leadership team together, or even a group of employees, but get together and ask yourselves, what does drama and toxicity look like in our organization? And I'd even add a third one in there: drama, toxicity, and immaturity. And just make a laundry list. Make a laundry list of what that looks like, so that you agree on it as a group to say, we don't want drama, We don't want toxicity and we don't want immaturity. So how can we recognize it when it shows up? Let's start recognizing it, and let's make sure that those who are purveyors of drama, toxicity, and immaturity are gotten rid of.
Mhm.
Because it's those three things, the drama, toxicity, and immaturity, that drives good employees away. It burns people out. When I have to go to work and sit next to somebody in the truck who is complaining about everything, who's a victim, who wants to blame, it sounds like I'm listening to CNN or Fox News sitting next to me all day long. It's so negative. All I want to do is just leave.
Yeah. And you might be thinking, okay, we're in the midst of this great resignation. We barely have enough people to operate our service at the minimum levels, let alone the levels we should be operating at. And these two guys are telling us to start firing people? Yeah, we are. And it's one of those things that until you've done it, you won't believe me. But if you will do it, you'll be a disciple, which is once you start getting rid of the toxicity, the toxic people, people will come back. And
And
I can give you to clients that will tell the story better than I can. A client that we had not only replaced half of his leadership team because of challenges, and a number of clinical staff, and they're a service that does lots of calls in any day, primarily interfacility work, primarily non-emergency with some 911. And this person will tell you that as soon as he started doing it, he started getting phone calls saying, hey, I understand some things are different. Love to come back. Love to help out. You know, I used to do that for the organization. I used to be the scheduler. I used to be one of the soups. Love to come back. All of the stars started picking up the phone. And this particular person would tell you through all of this COVID, not only has this organization been fully staffed, they have a waiting list.
And it all gets to this whole idea that in today's world, recruiting is largely done via social media, and you need your frontline employees to be enthused about the organization because they're going to be your best recruiters. And if they're lukewarm about how things are going in your organization, when somebody contacts them, that lukewarmness is going to go out there. And that's when I'm choosing, if I'm a 20 something and I'm choosing an EMS, fire, or law enforcement organization that I want to work with today, I want one where I'm hearing people say good things about it. So that's why cleaning house matters.
Yeah. And one of the ways that you can get clearer about culture, because obviously you have a culture in your organization, and it might be one that you don't want, that is being driven by the bottom third folks in your organization. Somebody else is driving the narrative. Is create a culture statement. Be happy to help with that. These don't have to be a book as thick as War and Peace, and hopefully they wouldn't be. A few paragraphs would be great, but a famous, wonderful leader that I unfortunately never got to know, but John certainly did, is Chief Alan Bernasini for Phoenix Fire. And his culture statement, often characterized as their mission statement, was be nice, help out, be a family, and everybody goes home. And those 4 words were a way that Alan Bernasini could lead a culture beyond just an infraction of a policy and a procedure or the number of tardies. Get clear about your culture so that you can start holding people accountable, not only to the job, their technical proficiency of the job, but also to the culture of the organization.
So when it comes to culture and engagement, I want to talk about one other thing. And it's the biggest mistake that all EMS leaders make, which is we assume that we understand our workforce. And what I want to encourage you to do is create some time in your day and cultivate some curiosity about why people are leaving, about how they're feeling today. What do they mean by burnout? What do they mean by the fact that you're not supporting well-being? We This curiosity begins by suspending your own judgment. It's really hard for us to do, but it starts with suspending your own judgment. Secondly, it involves investing some time. You cannot be curious about people without investing time. And then thirdly, it's really some inquiry. We like to use a variety of questions, but I'll just suggest a couple that will start you out. Which is a simple question would be, a very simple one is, what could we do better for you? Another question can be this very simple question of, does it feel like you're giving more than you're getting? Or does that feel balanced? And often today, people feel like they're giving more than they're getting. So what you want to do is find out what's underneath that. Another simple question to ask people is, does it feel like the organization is moving forward, is stuck, or sliding back? And then listen to what the people have to say, especially listen to the stuff that feels riling you up, hurtful maybe. Listen to that. Don't defend, don't deflect, don't try to answer or explain. Just listen, because the curiosity followed by the suspension of judgment and inquiry will in and of itself create a stronger relationship with the person you're trying to understand.
And if you want to work on culture and engagement, pause and ask yourself, are you engaged? Do your actions and behaviors lead the culture you want? We may be part of the problem. So what I've noticed in organizations that I'm working with is that executive presence seems to have gone away. I have experienced organizations where the F word is a comma and is used as often as a comma is used. And it's tolerated, if not used by the leaders themselves. Where actions and behaviors don't match what you would imagine in executive presence. Language, uniform appearance, appearance around the building. Are you engaged? Are you burnt out? Yes, I know you're tired. Yes, I know the weight of an organization and hundreds, thousands of employees are on your shoulders. That's what we signed up for when we became leaders. And so one of the things that John talked about was balance. And one of the things he certainly has taught me, and it's something I use on a regular basis for my own balance, is making sure I'm regularly checking in about my own work-life balance. So I choose to love and live with an individual. And so on a regular basis, I'm pausing to ask her, do things feel balanced? Whether that's around the chores around the house, or who has to make supper every night, or if I'm not loading the dishwasher or am loading the dishwasher, who's mowing the grass, the list goes on. Do you have your own balance? Because if balance is off, then maybe executive presence is jeopardized. And then my own engagement is waning, and I'm not creating and leading a culture that I would want.
Well, we certainly aren't going to have time to talk about conversations. We might have to pick that up next time. But I just, in closing, wanted to say something, and then I'll let you have the last word, Aaron. I just wanted to say how we frame this great resignation matters a lot. And how we look at it ourselves is going to matter how we treat it. So here's a suggestion. This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to grow yourself and to grow your leadership team in a way that you haven't before. It's a time to say the old strategies don't work. The old ways aren't going to suffice. What can we do new? And then just lean into that growth. This is I think, going to birth a new generation of emergency services leaders that are going to, they're going to wow us. And I'm encouraging you to step into this and take this as an opportunity for growth.
Yeah, and I would take it one step further to say, if you get really serious about culture and create one that fosters high employee engagement, this feeling that folks have about your organization, how enthused, how motivated, how committed, how willing to do more than expected they are, you'll have a competitive edge.
Yeah.
And I think our competitive edge in the future is not going to be our Medicare reimbursement, subsidy, millage, per capita, the best prices we can get on supplies, the best medical guidelines that we can get. It's going to be people. People will become the new capital for emergency medical services, public safety, and the list goes on. Finding and keeping more of them is going to be tied to how you lead through this great resignation, or whether you let the great resignation lead you. Will you be proactive or will you be reactive? Those of you that can be proactive, you're going to win. I know you will.
So thanks a lot, Aaron, for hanging out.
Thanks you. Yeah. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to the next one. It sounds like we already have a few items to talk about next time we get together.
Great. Well, take care, everybody.
Yeah. Be well, everybody. Be safe.